Aquinas made an
I'm
argument
sorry.
for it based on
I
that.
think I've given you a lot of patience. Thank you.
Empathy is real. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's all I would have to say.
Okay.
I don't really have a question, but I want a couple of clarifications.
Microphone.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
I just have a couple of questions about the idea of minimization of pain. Just as an example, if I say that everybody has the right to drive a car because it minimizes the pain of walking long distances, for example, my point is that let's say there is no discovery of an alternate fuel source. Minimization of pain at this moment in time, in the sense that everybody has the right to drive a car, could cause greater pain to future generations, in the sense that we exhaust a limited resource like petroleum or oil. So my point is that minimizing pain in a certain sense now could cause greater pain in the future. How would you resolve that? And the second related question is, let's say you need a certain amount of resources to minimize the pain, but these resources are limited. And if you do not have sufficient resources to minimize pain for everybody, how would you then go about doing it?
I don't know. Yes, we can have, the road to hell is sometimes paved with good intentions. I don't know what the solution is if the current energy sources become depleted and we don't have alternatives.
No, that was just an example. So on a time scale, how would you actually think of the problem? Would you think about minimizing pain now, or would you think on a broader time scale?
We're talking about so many variables, though, and down the road. Can you predict what the economy is going to be like 100 years from now, or even 50 years from now? There's so many variables. I don't think there's much of a point in thinking such long term, even though it's important. I don't think Singer thinks like that. It's, you know, here's the pain now. What are you going to do about it? What can we do? Well, boycott. One thing that Singer argues that we are very powerful is in boycotting. Whenever we buy something, we're voting for it. The dollar is a vote, let's say. So if we think what's going on in slaughterhouses is wrong, well, we could become activists like PETA, or we could just simply not buy the product and boycott it. The same thing that was done with apartheid. When it comes to resources, we could boycott what we think are going to be harmful consumer actions down the line. That's the best we can do. We can't hope. We're not omniscient. We don't know what's down the line. We can only do the best we can and hope for the best. But I think that's a lot better than just saying, well, nothing matters. Right?
No,
whatever we do.
can I just
No, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
It's getting late.
Hi. I'm referencing your comments about David Hume, and specifically, quote, the appeal to real features of human nature, pity, compassion. They're triggered when we see, not just read about the suffering of others. Our human instincts are triggered, and that the way to fight injustice is to make it visible. That was absolutely true for me. Saw the stuff, went vegan overnight. I'm about to present to a community of which I'm a part. And my question is, in my experience over the last number of years, I've had friends and acquaintances who have seen the information, but have yet not been moved by pity or compassion to change their behavior. So I'm wondering if you could comment on that. Or
I think the time to get them is when they're young. That's the best children. As people get older, there's a big debate in moral philosophy about whether people really are moral reasoners. And I'm skeptical.
mm-hmm.
Some people are. I think most people are not. There's more groupthink going on than anything else when it comes to morality. So There's more going on than simply the human instincts. There's no question about it. There's these other instincts that were discovered later: groupthink, Solomon Asch thing, and obedience to authority, and that's scary. So how does one undermine those instincts? Education, and get them when they're young. Yeah, more likely to convert people to vegetarianism when they're 18 than when they're 6. You know what's really interesting? I mentioned Albert Schweitzer as an icon of mine. Just an amazing human being. And then years ago, I would buy books on Schweitzer and buy Schweitzer, and I bought a book called In Africa with Schweitzer by a doctor who went to visit him on 2 different occasions and spent time with Schweitzer and wrote about his conversations with Schweitzer and the things he saw at the hospital, Lamborghini, I think it's pronounced. And to my utter shock and horror, Schweitzer was not a vegetarian.
Wow.
Yeah. And secondary sources all said he was a vegetarian, but this person, this doctor, saw meat being served among the doctors in the meals among the doctors with Schweitzer, alligator meat, chicken, and he asked Schweitzer, "Why not vegetarian?" And Schweitzer's answer was, "Well, if you take evolution seriously, we evolved an instinct for meat. There's no point in resisting it." Okay, my icon went from there to there, but he's still an icon. And it raises the question, Dawkins says that famous line, "We can rebel against the tyranny of our genes." And if Schweitzer is right, there's a tyranny of our genes there. So how do we rebel against it? Well, we're going against the flow.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean we can't rebel, and it doesn't mean we can't succeed. The question is how. I think it's education, and get them when they're young.
Thank you.
Best I can do. Sorry. Thank you.
Hi, I was just wondering if you see potential for like anti-oppression type of activism as resolving what you seem to see as a conflict where you have this dark side, like groupthink is a dark thing, and at the same time this negative utilitarianism. I mean, human rights, from my observation, is not a key concept in the more sort of cutting edge and kind of radical activism today. Human rights is being used by mostly state-funded, corporate-funded organizations, like anti-oppression stuff, anti-racist, anti-colonial, feminist stuff. So, do you see any? Because I'm personally hopeful, as that's the nexus, for groupthink to actually be something useful, because it has an evolutionary root, and just to fulfill what you're saying, like this kind of. I imagine that Singer could be considered an anti-oppression thinker in some way.
And I hope you're right that the cutting edge of anti-oppression activism is not based on universal human rights. But going back to groupthink, evolutionary biologists routinely point out, sociobiologists and evolutionary psychologists routinely point out that what is adaptive in one environment can be maladaptive in another. Right? Groupthink, arguably, and obedience to authority was arguably adaptive in a hunting-gathering past, where we evolved in small hunting-gathering groups. Right? You take that instinct and put it into a new environment called modern civilization, where there's nuclear weapons and all the rest of it. And what was adaptive, what helped groups survive and reproduce and pass on their genes, is now arguably maladaptive, a danger, a threat. And that's a serious issue. And again, Stanley Milgram, it's interesting when one reads his book, he puts the, and he doesn't call it, but the idea is there. It's an instinct for obedience to authority. And he argues that was adaptive in a hunting-gathering past. But now it scares the wits out of him, because he saw it in action in the Nazis. His focus was on the Nazis.